Welcome to our In Focus coverage tonight on evictions in Utah. We begin by sharing an extended version of an interview with Deborah Chamberlain, who is a single mother of 3 children, 2 of which are living with her right now. We spoke to her last week as she was forced to move out of her place. She had only been renting her place for 6 months when the landlord decided to sell the property and give her only 30 days to vacate. It is now legal for them to do so after the eviction moratorium ended on Saturday.
Because of the ban, I've been given a vacate order. So it's given me a limited time to look for something. If the ban was still in place, that would give me more time to look, and because of the housing market, that gives me a limited time to find something with the ban being in place. And the market's hard right now to find anything. As soon as something goes online or comes up, it's really hard. They're already gone.
We then asked Deborah about the issues she's experiencing with trying to find a new place to live in such a short amount of time.
Well, I have a fixed income, so that makes it so I have to go off my income that's set, and without having the 3 times the amount that most landlords want, I have to look for certain income capped housing. Those are all full for the most part. And then also, I have waiting lists. So I need more time to sit on a waiting list or to wait for somebody to get kicked off something or just to keep looking. Well, that's not going to happen. The ban's gone.
Deborah shared her concerns about the end of the eviction moratorium while the state is still seeing a surge in COVID-19 cases and hospital admissions.
It's not safe to go from one house to another or to keep moving around or even go to a shelter, God forbid. I wouldn't wish that on anybody right now. And if I go to my parents' house, they're both older, and if one of us gets sick, they get sick. If I go to any of my friends' house with small children, if my kids get sick, they get sick. So doubling up on people in the household is a risk.
Deborah said she understands why some may think it's time for the eviction moratorium to end, but wanted to point out that it helped protect people who were being kicked out of their place for other reasons.
I think that there's certain circumstances where it needs to be applied. I do understand there's some circumstances where people are taking advantage of it, and in those circumstances, I think there needs to be a limitation where people are just not working on purpose or not paying rent thinking they're going to slide by forever. There needs to be a limit to that. However, the people that are trying, the people that are doing their best, I think that it's unfair to people on the lower income level that don't have a choice in this situation.
Deborah said she doesn't know what her next steps are. All she can do is keep looking and hope something opens up.
I've been told to sit on a waiting list for vouchers that are non-existent. I've been told to sit on waiting lists for different apartments. I've been told, well, go stay at a shelter, go stay with friends, go find family to stay with, go rent a 1-bedroom, but no one wants kids. I've been told to go check out of state, which I've done, but a lot of states have the same problem we do. So I've checked other surrounding states and they're having the same problem, and a lot of it's because people from this state and other states are now moving there to get the cheaper housing.
She then explained why she's speaking out and sharing her situation.
I've seen people that have their rent suddenly increased. I have friends in other states that are telling me that they have friends that their rent in 1 month got increased by $500 to $700, and now they're scrambling and they don't know what to do. I've seen people in this state that suddenly are behind 2 months because of job loss that are now getting evicted. So I think a lot of people are having hard situations to deal with, and so I don't think I'm alone. And a lot of people are afraid to speak up, and I think this is an important subject.
And she just wants the public to know.
I think it's really easy to judge things when you're not in the situation, and really easy to assume that everybody can just go out and get a job that'll pay enough but that's not always the case.
Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on evictions and rental payments during COVID. Joining us now via Zoom is Tara Rollins, Executive Director of the Utah Housing Coalition. Tara, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time. Could you update us on what the CDC announced just hours ago in regards to evictions?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised this afternoon when I was on a late call and it came across our national call that President Biden was going to be announcing a moratorium. And so they set up a new moratorium through the CDC, and it's going to be for the next 2 months. And so it's going to end October 3rd. I think for Utah, we're doing a really good job of getting money out, but there's other states that are slow. And so I think the moratorium is really meant for a lot of the other states to get funding out. But it gives us an opportunity to do a little bit more outreach and reach people that are not accessing the funds.
Going off of your answer there, can you elaborate a little bit more as far as how the state of...
As we moved down to the second batch of funding that was received by the state, what they did was they designed a portal, one portal that everybody was going to apply through to the state. And so that has been, I mean, extremely successful. They started that, you know, really the beginning, I think in January, they started working on it. And by the time, you know, the funding arrived, we were able to start deploying that. I think some of the hiccups that we're having is right now our, you know, largest rental stock is in Salt Lake County. And so we have one agency that is, you know, working with these applicants, as well as there's 21 agencies that are doing outreach on behalf of, you know, different populations. And so there was a huge disparity in the first round of people that were being evicted and people that were actually accessing housing assistance. And so those 21 agencies, the county really saw that as, you know, a need to do that. And I applaud them for, you know, reacting right away and getting the people on the ground. Because, you know, there are barriers of language, you know, people don't have computers, they, you know, they're technology, you know, challenged like myself. But also just having things in the right languages and, you know, trusting the government, because a lot of people, you know, don't trust the government. So, but I will have to say that our biggest hurdle right now is the fact that there's not enough employees. And so right now, one of the community actions is down, I believe, 6 intake workers. And the other issue is that they're being burnt out. When you are dealing with people that are in crisis, it's really hard for somebody to work all day and then go home and forget about, you know, people's problems. And so we need to figure out a way to support those frontline workers as well.
Tara, who are the people who typically face these challenges? Do they fall into any particular demographic?
Well, first of all, I will say the ones my heart goes out to everybody, but we have you know, a lot of seniors that are on, you know, fixed incomes. And so because they're on a fixed income, they're needing to probably get a part-time job so they can afford their rent. Well, during you know, the first go around of this pandemic, they couldn't work. And so their income was down. And so, and also, you know, some people like seniors, you know, needed to access housing assistance because they had to have food delivery opposed to being able to go to the store to get it. So they had extra expenses as well. But seniors are just not the only ones. We have, you know, really hardworking people in our community that kept, you know, myself and others, you know, afloat. So I went to the grocery store those people had to work out in public. I could work at home. We have, people that, lost, especially in our service industry, lost hours or their jobs completely. And so, when our tourism is down, there's no jobs. And as well as those jobs are especially low income, and most of them paying, I would say, around $12, $13 an hour. And that's about 30% of our income. I mean, area median income for someone. And it costs 2021 an hour to be able to afford a 2-bedroom place. And that's even if you can find it at market rate. So I would say the majority of the people that are accessing the funds are working, either, shorter hours or lower pay. Maybe they had to go out and get a job that paid less than they previously had. So having this housing assistance is so important, because if someone is evicted, then they don't have a place to really call home and be able to have the foundation to be able to go to work. And we need the workforce right now. So housing people and keeping people housed is really important.
Tara, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but we appreciate all of your insight and knowledge on this topic. And folks, you've been hearing from Tara Rollins, Executive Director of the Utah Housing Coalition. Tara, thank you so much for your time and insight on this subject.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on evictions and rental payments during COVID. Rounding out our conversation tonight is Paul Smith. He is the Executive Director for the Utah Apartment Association. And Paul, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Paul, what are your thoughts about the CDC's new announcement just hours ago to enact a new moratorium on evictions?
Well, it was a little bit of a surprise, but I have to tell you, in Utah, it won't matter very much. Most renters that are behind on rent have paid rent or are accessing the rental assistance from the state. And so there really isn't a backlog of people that owe their landlords money.
Well, and I'm wondering, how have property owners done financially during the pandemic? Have they been losing money?
You know, great question. No, not really. The collections for rental properties in 2020 and the first half of 2021 are within about a percentage or two of normal. And so they aren't owed a lot of money. And the primary reason is all of the aid, and as Tara Rollins discussed, the great job the state of Utah's government is doing in getting rental assistance to households that need it. Just to throw out a couple of numbers, in 2020, the state distributed almost $25 million of rental assistance. And in the first half of 2021, they've already distributed almost $40 million in rental assistance. That's money paid directly to landlords so that renters can stay housed and stay healthy.
Well, that's good to hear. For those rental property owners who are affected, what are you advising them to do during the moratorium?
Well, the first thing I want to say is rental property owners have been superheroes in this crisis. They've been patient. They've accepted payment plans with renters. They've been very understanding. And so we encourage them to continue to be understanding and patient. However, renters also need to do their part. In their part, they need to apply for this rental assistance. If they apply for rental assistance, they get it quickly. Usually within 2 weeks, there's a check to their landlord. So renters need to make sure they're not burying their heads in the sand, and landlords need to be understanding and try very hard to connect their renters to this rental assistance.
Now, I want to get into that eviction rate in Utah that you were talking about earlier. Could you break down how many there are each month and how many are missing payments?
Sure. You know, Utah has a pretty low eviction rate compared to the rest of the country. We evict on average about 600 people a month, or 7,200 a year in a normal year. Now, 2020, evictions were down 40%, and in 2021, in the first half, we've averaged about 329 evictions a month. So it's almost half of normal. Now, you asked me also how many of those evictions are for non-payment. Landlords and attorneys tell us that about a third of the evictions are for issues of criminal activity. They're for renters who aren't complying with the lease, who are throwing loud parties, who are not maintaining the property and doing nuisance type things. But 2/3 are for non-payment. Now, during the CDC's eviction moratorium, there were a considerable number of non-payment evictions. Unfortunately, that's because the renters were not accessing the rental assistance and weren't following the CDC's mandates. The moratorium is kind of a bad name for it. It wasn't a moratorium, it was a defense. So a renter, when facing an eviction, if they were working with their landlord, if they were making partial payments, and if they had applied for rental assistance, they could defer eviction till the end of the eviction moratorium, but it was never an outright ban.
How interesting. Now, Paul, you did talk a little bit in that answer about the termination of leases. So we know they can happen at any time. You mentioned some of the circumstances where landlords could end a lease. Are there any other circumstances that you can think of?
Yeah, unfortunately, when leases are up, either party has the right to give the other one notice. So a renter can leave with 30 days notice, either if they're on a month-to-month contract or if they're at the end of their lease. Likewise, landlords can make a decision to sell the property, to reposition, upgrade, renovate, and raise the rent. And so it must be frustrating for those renters who occasionally are asked to leave because their lease is up and the landlord changes their mind, wants to sell or do something else. I truly empathize with those people, and I encourage landlords to give as much notice as possible. I encourage at least 60 days notice. That will help people, particularly in a hard time to find a new apartment, give them some lead time to get a nice new place.
Paul, what do you think the biggest challenges for rental property owners will be going forward?
Well, I think we're in a time where real estate has become a little bit of a scarcity. We're not building enough rental units or housing units at all in Utah. In fact, studies tell us we're about 50,000 units below what we need. A third of those units are rental housing. So we have not enough rental housing units and more people that want them than can get them. So what that does, it drives prices up. As we've seen, new homes are going up 20% a year. And rent is going up not nearly as much, but about 5% a year. So it's going to be a challenge to help renters understand why rents are increasing and to continue to provide quality product. Look, we've all been renters. We sympathize with renters. We want them to all be successful. Pay your rent, apply for rental assistance, communicate with your landlord. Those are all things that will help you.
Paul, we have time for final thoughts. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share or if you've thought about how some of the ways we can solve some of these challenges, issues, and difficulties that we're seeing.
Well, the biggest way is take advantage of this rental assistance. The state of Utah has received almost $400 million from the federal government. And if we don't use that money on renters in Utah, it goes to other states. So, renters, if you make less than 80% of the annual median income in your county, you can qualify and apply for this rental assistance. Even if you can pay your rent just fine, apply for this rental assistance. It's meant as stimulus for Utah's economy. The federal government will pay your rent so you can save for a home or eat out more or patronize businesses that have been hurting. So please take advantage of the rental assistance that's out there. You can reach out to 211, that's the number you call. You can reach out to any of the community action partnerships, or my favorite option is talk to your landlord. Most landlords are set up to apply on your behalf and help you get the aid.
A lot of good tips there. You've been hearing from Paul Smith, Executive Director of the Utah Apartment Association. And Paul, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
And don't forget, we'd love to hear from you about the show. We invite you to join our Facebook group by searching for ABC4 In Focus, or you can send us an email, infocus@abc4.com.